We are recording the interview of Tom Rayl. This interview is being conducted by Jennifer Seavey from Wright State University's Veteran Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio. It is 3:30 p.m. on September 7th, 2017. Okay, Tom, where and when were you born?
I was born in Akron, Ohio on November 13th, 1949.
Who are your parents and what were their occupations?
My parents were James and Frances Rayl. My father was a retired Navy veteran, an enlisted man, and my mom was a homemaker, busy with 6 children.
Who are your siblings?
Well, surviving siblings, I have a brother, Tim, younger than me, and a sister, Kathy, and a sister, Debbie, both younger than me. And I have 2 older brothers that have preceded me in death.
Did any of them serve in the military?
No. Actually, my brother Ron was drafted. Sorry, I forgot. Brother Ron was drafted, went through basic training in Fort Ord, California, but he was discharged due to his poor eyesight. So he did not have an Army career or anything like that.
Okay. What were you doing before you entered the service?
I was attempting to go to community college, but I was distracted and probably not doing very well at it, so I was looking at the military as an option. So that's what I did.
What were you going to school for?
Just my prerequisite general education requirements. Yeah, at that time. I had no idea what I wanted to do or what my career goals or objectives were, really.
So which branch did you enlist in?
I went into the United States Air Force.
And why did you choose the Air Force?
Really, I know my dad was a Navy veteran. That probably had something to do with me not wanting to go in the Navy. I don't know why specifically. He never said that he disliked the Navy, but I didn't want to be in the ocean on a ship. Just didn't interest me, and I thought that the career opportunities or training or opportunities to do something special were better in the Air Force. I didn't want to go in the Army or the Marine Corps. Wasn't interested in proving myself necessarily in a combat situation. So the Air Force looked like the way to go.
What was your MOS?
Well, in the Air Force they called it our AFSC, and that was 462 XO, and the X is just a placekeeper for what skill level you were at. So I think I was a 46250 at my highest rating. That is an aerospace weapons mechanic. And basically we were the people that loaded munitions on Air Force aircraft. In my case, I was in the Strategic Air Command, and it was, basically B-52 bombers. And I loaded nuclear weapons in the United States here before I left for the overseas assignment during the Vietnam War. So nuclear weapons here, and then just conventional weapons in Southeast Asia.
Okay. So where were you sent for basic training?
I went to Amarillo Air Force Base in Texas, Amarillo, Texas. It was in the throes of closure, and we were one of the very last basic training classes to go through Amarillo, Texas. Everything was being diverted to Shepherd, I think. Mm-hmm.
What was basic training like for you?
Well, it was an eye-opener. But I came from a disciplinarian, style home life, so it wasn't really that bad for me, but it was, I think it was worrisome. You were always on edge because you didn't know what was coming, what to expect. It wasn't necessarily difficult for me because of what I came out of, before I got there. But I had friends that were really reduced to tears, some of them. But no, it wasn't particularly hard for me, but it was stressful. And, in 1968, those training instructors were still pretty in your face and physical with people, not me, ever. But people that got out of line and were, troublemakers, they made physical contact with them. There was a lot of yelling in your face, a lot of screaming, a lot of impromptu inspections, and they trashed our barracks, and we had 24 hours of KP duty and marched back, to the barracks wet and tired, and our mattresses were hanging out of the windows and our uniforms were on the ground, and it was that was about the extent of it. But if you paid attention, kept your mouth shut, followed instructions, it wasn't hard to get through it. So I pretty well survived that.
Do you recall any of your TIs?
I do. Mm-hmm. We had a barracks that was World War II wooden barracks, 2-story, upstairs, downstairs with a central stairwell. And we had a TI assigned to each flight at each side, and then we had a lead TI who was their boss, and I remember him. His name was Inguante, and Sergeant Inguante was a pretty tough little guy. We went through 2 DIs in my flight. They just got in trouble themselves, extracting money from trainees, threatening to set them back. That was the big fear. You're going to get set back to day 1 and have to start all over again. So taking money from guys, and there were some other problems that they were getting in trouble for. So I actually had 3 TIs in my basic training experience, but yeah, they're not otherwise not memorable.
Okay. After Texas, where did you go for your training?
They took us on a bus from Amarillo, Texas, up through New Mexico, and into Denver to Lowry Air Force Base. And that's where the weapons schools were.
And that's in Denver? Okay.
And we thought, oh boy, we finally moved on, and now we're real, airmen, and all that basic stuff and all that yelling and screaming is over. But when we pulled into Lowry and we got off the bus, people were yelling out the window at us, you're in a world of shit now. This is really bad. We're like, what are you talking about? We just came from, a really bad situation. It was actually worse. Tech school was worse. They put us in what was called PATS, a PAT squadron, and that's personnel awaiting training. And those were military World War II barracks. They were spit shined, and you were, bouncing quarters off the bedspread. We had ropes, which were like, selected people that were supposed to be, candidates for, higher things. But they came around and, pushed us around, messed up all of our stuff. So the whole period through PATS, you were waiting an assignment to your training class. So you're being ridden really hard. It seemed like they were trying to break us down and find out if there was any of us that were going to be foul-ups or problem children. And we ran the base. We did the cleaning, we mowed the grass. My job was to grind up dental casting material from the dental clinic. When they made an impression of someone's mouth, they had buckets of this rubber that had been in people's mouths, and we were putting it into like a meat grinder and turning the handle and grinding it up, because I think they recycled it. They had some process. I did that. I buffed floors. I washed garbage cans. You know, I mowed grass. I did all sorts of things. So PATS was really bad. More stressful than basic training, honestly. And we were headed for a weapons school. We were headed for a school that required human reliability and observation. So they wanted to see if you were stable, if you were okay. And we were told, and I believe this, that all of our personnel records and our medical records in particular had a red triangle stamped on it, and that meant that you were a person that was in a human reliability assignment. They wanted to monitor your mental status and your fitness always, because we were close to nuclear weapons. We handled nuclear weapons, and then later on we were loading bombs. Obviously, you don't want somebody who's not stable in that environment. So yeah, the training thing was hard until you got into school. Once you got into school, you got your face in your books and you were worried about memorizing lots and lots of details and paying close attention, learning things. It got much easier. Yeah, much easier.
So after Denver, where did you go?
Denver, I got a little bit of leave. I went home to, just for a little bit of leave. And I actually watched Neil Armstrong walk on the moon. So I remember being home on leave, being at my mom's house, and that was, I think, sometime around July of '69. No. June, maybe June. I can't recall now. I think it was June of 1969, but I was home on leave, and we watched the lunar lander land on the moon, and it was pretty cool. And then after that short leave, I was assigned to Mather Air Force Base in Sacramento. Mather Air Force Base was a navigator training base primarily. It's where they had the flying classrooms, and they trained all of the Air Force navigators there at that time. But also at Mather Field, because of SAC's mission, they had a SAC wing also there at Mather Field. So we were kind of sequestered back in the corner. There was an alert pad, an alert shack with all the bomber crews on alert, and a large weapons storage area with nuclear weapons and munitions maintenance squadrons, everybody else to take care of that. So that was my first duty assignment there. So people are surprised to hear me when I say, oh, I loaded nuclear bombs in Sacramento, and they're looking at me like, what? Do you have nuclear bombs in Sacramento? Well, they did. So yeah, that was my first duty assignment.
What was your biggest challenge there?
Oh, a challenge? Keeping up, because you had a blend of airmen that had already been to Southeast Asia and back. They were maybe career airmen, people that decided to stay in. Some of them were tech sergeants, master sergeants, and they were our supervisors and our mentors. And then the guys in lower grades that were closer to me, that were on load teams. We had teams of 5 people for nuclear weapons. And some of them were very experienced, and some of them were just green like me. They called us Jeeps. We were Jeeps. So the hard part was paying attention and keeping up, because they were very highly stressful jobs. The load was always, or the download or the upload was always in a hurry. But you had to go by a checklist, and you had this very specific task to do, and they were watching you, constantly watching you to make sure that you were getting that work done. So it was hard. You never really got an opportunity to get on top of it because we were young and we were green, and the guys that were the leaders had already been there 3-4 years maybe, and it was just routine for them. But being new, and you don't want to fail, or you're worried, you know. So that was difficult. Probably the most difficult thing about it. Physically, not, but mentally, yeah, difficult mentally. Mm-hmm.
So how long were you in Sacramento before you went to your next duty station?
Less than a year.
Okay.
In fact, I was kind of like the new guy, the new kid on the block there, and I was the first one to get orders to go to Thailand during the war. And they were all like, "You just got here. Why are you leaving before us?" And nobody could explain why, but I got orders to go. So I spent a very short time at Mather, and then I went to Thailand right after Mather.
What were your duties like in Thailand?
What was the question?
What were your duties like in Thailand?
Totally different, totally different. So the bombers in Sacramento were more modern, you know, later modeled, and they were primarily equipped with nuclear weapons for the, you know, protection of the United States. But the bombers in Thailand were D-model bombers, which they called the Big Belly bomber. It was modified to hold a lot of iron bombs. So we went from a high, mentally stressful environment in Sacramento to something that was totally different. Still mentally stressful, but now pure physical labor. So although we had hydraulic lift trailers that were powered by electrical systems, and they hoisted thousands of pounds of bombs at one time into the bomb bay. All of those bombs had to be loaded first by hand, individually onto those assemblies. So intense manual labor, and I weighed 130 pounds. I'm not a big man, but you know, that particular job fell to me, so I had to sink or swim. Had a little difficulty adjusting to that physical labor just because of what it entailed, the rapid pace and the amount of weight. So my job basically was in what was called preload, and we preloaded what would be equivalent to a magazine that you'd put into a semi-automatic, you know, weapon. It's an empty clip that hangs on a rack. There's 3 of them that go inside of a D-model B-52, and they can hold up to 28 bombs each, so we're looking at 84 bombs. Each bomb weighs 500 pounds. And so my job was to roll those bombs on a trailer, 84 of them at a time, and one at a time, but for a total of 84. And then we had a little truck that picked the bomb up and went over and attached it. And it was a constant you know, physical motion all night long. I wore out 2 pairs of combat boots that year, just running the length of a 40-foot trailer rolling bombs. When the bomb got to the end of the trailer, there's wooden blocks. When you roll the bomb really fast, because they're coming back to get the next one. And my job was to be there ready with that bomb. Attach a safety strap and a bomb shackle. And in order to attach that, the lugs of the bomb that the bomb hangs, that the shackle attaches to and hangs from, have to be up. Well, when you roll the bomb, sometimes the bomb lugs would be like that, or maybe down. And there's a wire that travels through them, a piece like heavy baling wire that went from the nose fuse to the tail fuse, and that was an arming wire, we called it, and it was designed to keep the propellers on the fuses from spinning until the bomb was dropped, because the bomber would hold the wire and the bomb would fall, and then the propellers could spin and arm the bombs. Well, you can't spin the bomb on the trailer or you pull the wire out, so you had to roll the bomb fast, let it hit these wooden blocks, and the bomb would go up in the air and then spin the tail fin, let the bomb fall back down with the lugs up. So you kind of had to learn how to do that. So my first month, I was slow and got yelled at a lot, and it's like, you can't keep up, you gotta keep up. So eventually, you learn and you get that kind of rhythm and you get it going, So by about month 3, I was on a roll. I could do it, and then I did it for the rest of the year. But like I said, I wore out 2 pairs of combat boots. We worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week, and we worked a month of days, and then we had shift change, which entailed 16-hour shifts. We shifted over to a month of nights, then 16-hour shift, and then back to a month of days. So basically, you worked days and nights and days and nights alternatively throughout the year. So get a really bad sunburn, and then you'd turn really dark brown. You'd be really brown. Then you'd have shift change, and the shower water over there was really chlorinated, so you'd shower, of course, every day after a really, really sweaty 12 hours. And after a month of nights, you'd lose your tan, kinda. Then you'd go back and get sunburned again and get it back, and so that was kind of the routine. But absolute manual labor. I never worked harder in my life, never. And I've done the math, and I calculated that I physically rolled or handled over 6 million pounds of bombs in that year, conservatively. So, yeah, it was hard work. Very, very, very hard work. And we built a team spirit. We built, esprit de corps, if you want to call it that, And you all had to work together because we were in a very dangerous environment. We worked in a hole, basically. It was a load stand area that was in a pit with rock walls up. So if there was an accidental detonation, the blast would be deflected upwards, and it wouldn't cause a chain reaction and set off all the other bombs in the bomb dump. It was the largest munitions operation in the world at the time. They said that there were enough bombs in storage there, and they continued to bring them, but there were enough bombs in storage that they could fly 30 sorties a day for a year and not run out of bombs. There was that much stuff there. Bomb dump did blow up once. I wasn't there when it happened, but the bomb dump did blow up. They had a problem with some batch of bombs, and it blew up. We dropped bombs by accident. We'd be moving really, really fast, and somebody would just make a little, half-inch mistake and catch a bomb on a piece of metal or something, and it would come off of the rack, or it'd come off of the bomb lift truck, or a guy in my job would roll the bomb too hard to the wooden blocks and send it right off the trailer onto the ground. So I had one of those experiences in the year, but mentally, no. Once you got the hang of it, you're good to go. But physically, it was very, very hard to go every day, 6 days a week, and do that in the hot sun. In Thailand, it was probably 100 plus every day, 95% humidity, and yeah, it was. I don't think anybody else in any other MOS or AFSC in the Air Force ever worked as hard as munitions people did in loading B-52s. There's guys that loaded fighter jets, but what did they put on them, 8, 10, 15 bombs? We're doing 108 at a time. So it's hard work, yeah. So that was my Thailand experience.
And from Thailand, did you go back to the States?
I did. Came back after 12 months and came back to March Field in Riverside, California. And much to my disappointment, not at the time, but now that I look back at it, I think kind of got cheated a little bit, because You know, we were handpicked for our AFSC. So to get into the 462XO program, you had to have a really high mechanical aptitude. You had to have to score high on tests, and I worked with people that I felt were my peers. You know, when you were loading nuclear weapons, you were with people that were reliable and were thinking. So after we came back out of Thailand and came back to the States, there apparently was a surplus of 462s because they were, you know, loading bombs in Guam and Okinawa and Thailand. So too many 462s at the time that I got back in the States. So without much of any notice, I got orders to report to a POL squadron, which is petroleum, oil, and lubricants. The Air Force is sending me to POL at March Air Force Base. Now, that's an AFSC with no tech school. Came out of basic training, and you went right into POL. And you got there, you had basically OJT. So there were fuel truck drivers, and there were people that worked in the liquid oxygen plant, and there were people that, you know, worked in out on the flight line. They had a hydrant system in SAC. The amount of fuel that a B-52 took required, you couldn't do it with a truck efficiently, so that a hydrant system underground, so that a hose cart, you'll see it at the airport in fact. If you see a little white cart with the filter and all the hose on it, it's hooked to the hydrant in the ground, and then it's attached to the airplane, and they pump the jet fuel into the airplane from the hydrant system. Same thing in the Air Force. The Air Force probably invented that, and the airlines copied it. I'm not sure. Anyways, so I went from, you know, loading nuclear weapons and really working my butt off in Thailand for a year. I mean, really, I mean, we were on, I would say, on the verge of being abused. I don't want to put it that way, because the loading equipment was primitive. Although it was, some of it was powered, you couldn't physically get the bombs into the airplane without some hydraulics. But in preload, where we loaded those bombs, it was hand pumps. There was nothing automatic about it. It was hand pumps. And the only machine we had was the bomb lift truck, which we had to have. Otherwise, it was manual labor. Everything was manual. Everything. So, got back. We worked our butts off, you know, in a hazardous environment. The base was attacked right after I left. It wasn't attacked while I was there, but some North Vietnamese sappers came on to Utapao and threw grenades into some engines and blew up some B-52 engine nacelles, and that was, you know, it was considered a hazardous environment. We worked in direct support of combat operations. That was what we were. We were rear area people, but we were working in a real hazardous environment with the potential, you know, for problems. And get back and then get thrown into POL. And my job in the first 6 to 9 months of assignment there was to sit on the hose cart with the remote control button under the wing of the B-52, you know, and watch the meter go click, 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 click while we're pumping fuel. The guy would come by in a pickup truck and hook up my hose cart to the hitch, and I'd get in and he'd take me to the next bomber, and I'd push the button, hook up, push the button, and click, 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 and 2 hours later, you know, maybe I'd get a break, you know, but it was a no-brainer. It was nothing. And eventually I found out that they had a jet fuels laboratory, so I got kind of worked my way over that way, and I got noticed, and I did get a better, cushier job in the jet fuels lab, where we went out and took samples and came back and tested the jet fuel in a laboratory setting. So that was kind of fun. In fact, my coworker from there, I haven't seen him in 40 years. His mom lives in Dayton, and he's coming here tomorrow, and I'm gonna meet him here tomorrow.
That'll be great.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Now, was it shortly thereafter you were discharged?
Yes.
Okay. What did you decide to do after the military?
Well, you know, it might sound like I'm a little bit, you know, down on the way I was treated. In some ways I am a little bit of that way, but in other ways I wasn't. In other ways I was given, you know, some gifts. And one of them was what was called Project Transition. And the Air Force had a program to help you transition from your military career, which may not have had a civilian equivalency, into civilian life. And they looked at my AFSC and said, well, he's a bomb loader, you know, there's no civilian equivalent for that. And the POL thing was, I could have been a bulk storage manager or a gas truck driver or something, you know, that was about it. But I found out about Project Transition and I took advantage of that, and I got a little bit of an early release to start a semester of college. I used my GI Bill, which I consider a gift from the military, and I eventually, after 7.5 years, I was working full time and going to night school. I eventually got my bachelor's degree, but yeah, so getting out, I went right to school. Used my GI Bill.
Good. So we're winding down now. How did your military experience affect your life?
I think it's been the biggest influence, you know, over me, because I'm a little prideful about my 4-year experience, and in particular what I did, with the exception of the POL experience. But that front end, the first 2.5 years, you know, it was good, and it was a challenge, and I felt like, you know, I rose to the challenge, so I was proud of that. I recognize, and I recognize it more now than ever, but when you meet people in your life, and particularly men in my case, when you meet men, you can almost immediately tell if they are a veteran or not. You can almost tell if they've ever had a military experience or not. It's just there, and then once you ask them and they confirm your suspicion, then you feel like, oh, now I have this bond, this common bond. And I have friends that were in the Navy, I've got friends that were in the Army, and really good friends that were Marines, and we all kind of shared a common bond. And we share that feature, that common feature, that rivalry, inter-service rivalry, you know, where the Marines call me a wing wiper, and oh, you didn't, that wasn't really the military, you know that stuff, you know. So, but down deep, you know, hey, we all served our country in a particular way, you know. We went through training, and then we went into these challenging environments, you know. We came out of it, and now we're back in civilian life. We fought during the Vietnam War, or we participated in the Vietnam experience, you know. And in particular, when we came back, we all shared the same thing. Nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody wanted to recognize us. Nobody liked us in uniform. It was a difficult time. In fact, when I was at March Field, I never drove my car with a uniform shirt on. I always had a t-shirt on or a jacket. I never wanted anybody to know I was in the military. Even though I had to have a base sticker on my windshield, I wasn't overt about my military identity. And I think it's kind of sad, you know, that we all felt kind of ashamed of ourselves. You know, not that we, you know, necessarily did anything bad or wrong. In fact, people, and I met Cambodians in my later life, you know, and, oh, why you go to Thailand? Because I go to Thailand still. Why you go? I said, well, I was there during the war. Oh, really? Yeah. what you do there? I said, oh, I loaded bombs on B-52s. Oh my God, how could you do that, you know? Yeah, you get that reaction. And I always was prepared with the answer. I was saving American lives. That was the way I felt about it, you know? Yeah, hey, those things aren't cool. They're killing machines. That's what they're built for. And now I know that, you know, but I always felt like, hey, we were saving American lives, you know. And so all people in life, in my later life now that I've met, like, I don't throw this up, hey, I'm a veteran, are you? I don't go down that road. But eventually it comes around and you get to know people, and they, in conversation, they'll mention something, and oh, I thought you were a veteran, just by the way they acted or what they said or something, you know. And so we shared that common bond. And if they're Vietnam veterans, there's a little bit even stronger bond, just because of the way we were treated, you know. When we came back, nobody said thanks. Nobody was curious about our experience or what we did or anything. And the Air Force didn't make the differentiation either, in my opinion. I mean, I was no different. My uniform looked just like a hospital medical technician or an administrative person or a transportation guy, you know. I mean, and I thought, wait a minute, I'm a little bit in a different situation here for what I have been through, you know. And if you talk to any of these guys that are here this weekend that were in MMS, munitions maintenance, you'll hear this. You'll hear this, yeah. So anyways, that's kind of how it affected me. If that was the question, right? Yeah.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will watch this interview?
Well, I'm sorry to see this trend that's going right now. I think our country is in a state of slow decomposition. The world is changing. I think people have lost sight of how we got where we are. And there may be generational gaps now, you know. And Vietnam is a wound that will never heal. It's a scar. It's an open wound. It's not going to heal. And I think that, particularly in academic settings, you know, in America, it's been used kind of as a divisive tool. And I think maybe Vietnam was a mistake. I really do. I think it was. I think war is man's worst endeavor. I think it is. And I think what we were doing was bad. All war is bad. But freedom isn't free. And we need to have people who are ready and willing to come and stand up for this society that we live in. Go anywhere. Go to another country and see how soon you start missing home. Go to a country where the police are corrupt, where they won't come to your aid unless you pay them something, or, you know, you bribe them or coerce them, you know. Go to a country where the roads are crooked, where the infrastructure is so poor that the electricity goes off twice a day. And then you'll realize that this is a very special place we live in. And it's this way because guys that were our age back in the 40s, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, went to Iwo Jima, you know. And so, yeah, freedom isn't free. And anybody that served in the military in any capacity, I think, you know, shares a little bit in the protection and the longevity of this country. If we don't have a military presence and a way to defend ourselves, who's going to continue? Who's going to? And I always say, what's the world going to be like without America? Who's going to be the force for good? And I believe we are. I believe we always have been. Did we make mistakes? Did we make bad choices? Vietnam? Yeah. Yeah, we did. 58,000 people died over there, you know, for what? You know, for what? And there are going to be challenges in the future, but we need young people to step up and say, I love my country. I know this lifestyle that I lead isn't just an accident. This just didn't happen. This just isn't an entitlement. This was bought and paid for by a lot of people that came before me even, bought and paid for. And they're laying in cemeteries or in places unknown, And I think they think that they did the right thing, and I think we all of us that serve think we did the right thing by going. And young people need to be prepared to do the same thing. Yeah, it's important.
Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed that you'd like to share?
No, my Thailand experience was wonderful. Our government, either serendipitously or by intellect, chose Thailand as an ally, and Thailand has been a huge ally. Was a big ally, an important factor in the Vietnam War. Almost all the resources, there were many more resources placed in Thailand just over the border from Vietnam, right? Cambodia and Laos. And the Thai people have always been open and welcoming and sweet, and I go back, I've been back on the very ground where I spent that year with these people, and it's quite an experience. And they're still there. The Thai people have not changed. It's a beautiful country. They suffer. They're about 75 years behind us in infrastructure. They just haven't quite evolved, but they're happy. And it was Thailand in particular changed my life. Yeah, that's all.
Okay. Well, that concludes our interview, and thank you for your service.